Hallo, ich bin Nerea. Hola, me llamo Nerea. Bonjour, je m'appelle Nerea. Kaixo, Nerea nice. And hello, I'm Nerea. I hope I find everyone's language. Otherwise, I'd be happy to learn a new one. I'm a PHP engineer at Tekino for the last 3 years, and I've been using Drupal for the last 5. And today we'll be talking about migrate. So I'm gonna do a little hands-on on migrate so that everyone could understand what I'm gonna be talking about later. I'm gonna tell you my story. I'm gonna tell you what I learned from it, and I'm gonna try to answer my question from the beginning. So I start with migrate. How many of you have used it? Okay, but not everyone, so could be helpful. For those who already use it, did you use it for synchronizing data? Few. For migrating from a legacy app to a new app? Okay. And I have another question. And did you use it for migrating lots of data, like more than 200,000 of content? Oh, that's a lot. Okay, didn't expect it. So for those who already use it, you might know a lot of stuff that I'm gonna be talking right now, but for the other ones. So what does migrate do? Migrate is gonna take some source data, whether type it is, and it's gonna transform it into some Drupal contents, right? So it's gonna look something like this. And transform is gonna be a black box. You don't really know how it does it. And if I resume this with an example, let's say I have a Drupal 7 legacy app that has a basic page with a field description, and I wanted to upgrade it into something new with the same things. So a basic page with a field description. So if I take the example from before, the diagram from before, with the way it's going to work is that it's going to query the data source. So here, my Drupal 7 database. And it's going to get some rows. And from those rows, it's going to get some rows. So here's the example from Node. And you can see that it's going to fetch everything that it needs from the Drupal 7 Node tables, every field, every table that's related to Node. And here, I create my first migration, and I'm using it in my plugin source. Fine. Now we have every row we needed for migrating my basic page. And now I can, if I need to make some calculation, some logic, some new stuff, I can prepare each row that I'm going to be migrating to my new Drupal. And again, from Node, he's going to create new properties. So here he's going to create the title property from what Drupal 7 had, which is not the same kind. It's not the same kind in Drupal 7 that it is in the new Drupal. So it's going to transform it so you can use it simpler, I think, in a simple way. So we got our rows. We have prepared the rows if we needed to. Now we need to map each thing from the Drupal 7 to the new application. So here's the process where you're going to map everything. So you can see that I'm using the title property from the source plugin. And I'm creating my own description property, which is something I have made. And I'm using it. Easy. So I know what I'm going to fetch, which is Node. I know how it's going to be prepared. I know how it's going to be mapped. But I don't know how it's going to be transformed into my Drupal right now. So here's the destination. Now you can use your plugin destination. And you can precise anything you want. So I'm using the Node destination plugin. And I say that I'm going to be creating some page. And that's it. That's all you need to know to follow up with what I'm going to be talking about later. And that's all I knew before starting to work with Migrate 2. So let me tell you my story. I arrived at Tekino. And I didn't use Migrate before. So I arrived, and this new app came up. And it was a transformation from Drupal transformation. an upgrade from Drupal 7 to a Drupal 8. We were doing everything new because everything was not. I'm going to rephrase myself. So we were redoing everything because the logic that was used, the way it was created, wasn't good enough for the needs, the new needs for the clients. So we rethought everything from the logics, and everything from the graphic design was remade. If I tell you an example, is that they use nodes into nodes, so they could be displayed like blocks or paragraphs inside a node, which we are using Drupal 8, so instead we could use paragraphs, right? So this is one little change we made. And we developed our application without thinking of the migration part, which were going to come later. And everything went fine. We finished our app. It was beautiful. Everything was fine. And then the migration part came. And we started to think how we could create our dependencies. How was each migration going to be related to another? We are visual people, so we needed something visual. And we created a dependency graph. So it's just an example, because if I put everything, you couldn't see nothing. And you can see for the number of arrows in each node, which will be the most dependent on and which will be the first to be created. So here you can see that user and file is going to be the first ones that I'm going to be creating. And when we were doing that, we found out that there were a lot of unknown behaviors that we didn't expect, because we didn't know everything about the application, the legacy app. And the client didn't tell us what they knew, the clients. So we had to create specific logics, update our application. We had to create new contents on the Drupal. We had to do a lot of stuff to adapt ourselves, our application that was already finished, to what we discovered while doing the migration. So for example, as I said, we made everything new, everything beautiful, and we migrated the files from the Drupal 7. And those files, the resolution from those files, didn't correspond to the new image styles that we created for our beautiful site. So we ended up with a site that was looking ugly. And we need to rethink every image type that we had so that they could correspond to what we needed to be displaying and what we already had from the Drupal 7. And even right now, I think it was 2 weeks ago, the client's still asking to rethink those image types because they don't correspond to what they use, to what they put inside the fields. So even if the Drupal is thought to be, they still having issues. So we know that we will have a lot of issues, problems, while doing the migration. So we try to think, okay, what's the better way to simplify our lives? And the first one was to try to think as fast, to finish as fast as we could the mapping from the Drupal 7 to the new Drupal. And while we were doing that, again, we found out that this was not easy, as my first example from the beginning was going to be a little more complex. So again, an example. This is a real example, the simplest I could find to show you what it could be looking like. Let's say I have a node, and as I said before, they use nodes as paragraphs or blocks. So in our new Drupal, it was going to be transformed into paragraph. So I have a node, and depending on some conditions, it's going to be some type of paragraph or another. And even then, inside each paragraph, it's going to be transformed into, you could have some conditions that's going to transform it into some way or another. So for example, the paragraph B is going to not be the same type depending if link 1 is filled or not. So each kind of thing is going to be conditional, which made it a lot complicated. So I have a lot of cases. And for each case, the better way we could find is that we could create a source plugin for each case. So I have a behavior I want, for example, the first one, and I'm going to query the database from Drupal 7 to get just what we need, just what I need. And I'm going to be doing this for every case, every transformation that I'm going to be having, every behavior that I need to plan. So this is for the paragraph A. And I'm going to be having the same thing for the other two and the C. And again, to keep simplifying our lives, each plugin source is going to be specific to one case, to one logic. So the better way to do that is not to make it configurable. And to not make it configurable, it means that a plugin source corresponds to a migration file. So I will have 3 migration files for my 3 plugin sources, 1 for each case. So everything was going to be complex. We'll have a lot of cases to take into account because they were a lot, too much to speak of. And we wanted to be serene, to be sure of what we're doing. So we tried to plan as much as we could. And we tried to plan like this: what's going to be done before, what's going to be done while, and what's going to be done after the migration. So this is what we did. We disable any automatic behaviors. We clear the cache. We migrate everything, and we make it into steps for the dependencies. And after, we re-enable everything we disabled. And then we had to make some custom commands because we had some custom things to be doing later on due to some logic, some stupid logic. And then again, rebuild on the cache. I don't know about you, but I don't like writing YAML. I rather write PHP. And the better way for me to be doing migrations is to write as less that I can of YAML. So for this, I'll be preparing my words every time so that I write down the less things I can in YAML. So we had this case where we had some fragments from Drupal 7 that were going to be fragments on Drupal 8. But the fragments were related to nodes, now they're related to paragraphs. And I think that the way Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 used them was not the same way. So we had to do specific stuff, specific behaviors to get up the nodes in a simpler way we could. So PHP was the better idea. And even if Drupal proposes a lot of process plugins, it might not propose the one you need for a case, which was our case. I don't know if you know about it, but if you use migration lookup and it doesn't find your destination's ID, it's going to be returning null, which will make your migration to fail and crash and not work anymore. So to avoid it, because we didn't want it to fail while doing it, we knew that we had cases where the destination ID was going to be null because of how the data was migrated. So we knew we didn't want it to fail. So we created our own process plugin that's going to be running in the pipeline, on the process pipeline after the migration lookup to avoid the migration to fail and to be able to keep going from the beginning to the end of a migration. That was the better idea we had. And testing migrations is tedious work. So small chunks, the best way. Either way with limits because you don't have too much. But in this case, we had a lot of dependencies from the beginning to the end of the migration. So we had to try and find out a better way to test everything from the user to the last node we could create. And we tried to make it by using smaller queries like limited by IDs or something like this to avoid it. And of course, we disable any behaviors, automatic behaviors, because they're going to slow down every migration you're going to make. So it's already slow. Let's not make it slower. And then the go live of the application came up. And we were serene because we had everything that was planned, even though we had some manual migrations to be done by our POs. Everything was planned. So we knew when we should be doing our stuff, our commands, and everything was ready in that too, so we could be serene. So we were copy-pasting from the documentation you saw before. And everything was green, so everything was fine. And then something fails. We didn't expect it to fail. And we start investigating, digging up why it could be failing when it shouldn't. And we found out that the clients were not playing the game by creating stuff he shouldn't have been creating, which made some dependencies to fail, which made our migration to fail. So we just had to rerun some migration, and that was okay. But since everything was written down, and we didn't use our brains before because we were copy-pasting, now our brains was fully of energy to think of why it's failing now. So it was fast to adapt. And that's my first experience with migrate, which didn't go very well because of too much work, too much load of work. And I thought I was finished with it, but I wasn't. And the next one that came up was not a Drupal to Drupal, was Java to Drupal. So everything is different with Java. Everything is different with Neo4j. Everything is different with microservices. But the thing I was saying to myself is that the logic is going to be the same. I should not be doing anything that's not already done. And also, I think that the best thing that I thought is that people are maintaining the application, so people know how it works. People are using the application, so people should know how it works. It could tell me the domain that I'm looking for to make my own application. For those who don't know, Neo4j is a graph database. I didn't know before working with the project, so here it is. And the way it works is that it works with nodes, and each node is going to have a type. Here you have 2 persons and a car, and each node has its own properties, and between each node, you can have relations. So if you didn't know, now you know. We learned a lot of things from my first project with Migrate. I knew that we should be thinking about the migration as soon as we could. That creating the custom source plugins was a really good idea because I'm gonna fetch only what I need. And we knew that doing some documentation is gonna release our brains for some work later on. So we already knew stuff. But even then, we didn't expect it to be as much difficult as it was. The way that the resources were named was so much different from what the clients used as words to speak with us to explain its domain, that it was really difficult to find out of what he's talking about into the application and the database. And in the end, the people that were maintaining the application didn't know anything about the application because they were as new as us. So we couldn't find any help on the people maintaining the application. So we dig into the application to find how it works, how either on the code to find how things are related, or either on the database. We dig to find how we should find everything to migrate it later. And again, while we were doing this, we found that some ways of some relations, the clients didn't know about it. So we were like, hey, do you know that this is working like that? Well, no, but it's a good idea. Maybe we should change it. Yeah, change it. So we had to change our application to be, again, how do you say it? Equal, same as it was working before. I had fun doing this. This is an example of what the graph database was looking like. So I'm just looking for the posts, which could be news if you want, that are related to a content. And for doing this, and to find out everything that's related to a content, every post that's related to a content, I had to do all these ways, all these paths, to find them out. So you have a loop, you have a lot of relations, a lot of nodes everywhere to look into. To debug all this, we create our own commands to try to find out how what relations a type of resource has, to what kind of things it could be related, and how I could find everything from my content to my post. And this helped us to create our graph database, no, our own little database that's going to be like a middleware between the legacy app and the Drupal that's going to be used later to migrate. And in this database, we could do whatever we want. So we made it as simple as we could, trying to make it one field to one field. If I had to transform things, it's the time to be transforming things. If I could make it as simple as I can later on, that's the best way I can do it. So let's make it. But everything is not beautiful. We already were developing our application, even while doing the migration stuff on the side. And while migrating, people were doing features. And those features came up that they weren't really compatible with migrate stuff because they were doing things on the background. And as Search API and Passoto, doing things on the background means making it slower and maybe not useful. And the same way, as I said before, we discovered how things really worked on the application, and thus we had to change our own while talking to the clients and saying, did you know about it? No, I didn't. So change it. So in the end, everything went fine because we didn't have as much dependencies from as the first project. Everything was kind of alone, and we could make it incrementally, all migrations. And since we have learned a lot of things from the first one, we could anticipate a lot of those things. We could have our own ideas of how to do things. So I think it went better, but even then, we spent a year, more than a year, doing the migration from this project, which is a lot. So yeah, now you've seen my experience with it. So let me tell you what I learned. This is not related to Drupal. For me, it's related to any data migration you could be doing on your life. Is to be thinking about it as sooner as you can. Because the sooner you see things, the sooner you can raise alarms. The sooner you see things, the sooner you can write them down for later, because in 2 months, maybe you don't be thinking about it, and you will forget about it. Or maybe someone else that won't know about it. So document as you go, because you will need it later. You will discover that no one knows about the Neo4j, the legacy app, how it works. You will be discovering that some logics the clients didn't talk about until now. The sooner, the better. And what I really liked about it is that I want to simplify my life as much as I can. I'm a developer, so I want to simplify my life. So to do this, you could use whatever way you can. Our ways was to create some source plugins and to write as less YAML as we could, map down, make easy mappings from the source application to our new application. Make it easy. You don't have to make it complicated. It's not because it's work in a complicated way that you should make your life complicated. And even thus, Drupal already proposed lots of things. I think you can make like a format dating process plugins where you're doing the migration on. Again, even if Drupal proposes a lot of those things like format dates, might not know about your own case, might not know about what you need in this moment. So don't limit yourself. You should be able to write down some PHP. And again, try to be calm on the last day. So prepare yourself for it. Write down as much as you can. We write down our documentation, every command that we should be running, which helps us to our brain not be working before we needed to when it failed. So we had every energy that we could to try to figure out why the migrations failed at the moment, even though we had some unexpected behaviors, some unexpected data. So be able to simplify your life as much as you can for the day where you're going to be going live and you're going to be doing your migration to the last day. But I think it works for everything, not just related to migrating data. And if I try to answer my question from before, I would say that, yes, it could be the better way because I don't think there's something else that's already proposed. Depending on your case, you might be doing something custom, but is it the best way to do it? But I'll say most of the times. I saw some of you raising your hands for synchronizing data. I didn't use it for synchronizing data, so I would say that maybe it's not the best idea, but I'd be happy to talk about it later. And most of the time, because as you saw, we didn't use only migrate. We use everything we could on the side to use migrate later, but to simplify the way we use it. So why not? And if you think migrate should not be the go-to to migrate data, I'd be happy to hear about it. So thanks.
Any questions?
First of all, thank you for sharing such a nice experience. And my question is, what tooling were you using? Like, because you haven't mentioned, like what modules, like migrate Drush, what migrate tools, migrate plus. Have you been using this, and have you seen any obstacles during this using of your tools? Maybe not these modules, but others.
For the first one, it was the simplest application. It was a simple application. No, because we had a lot of paragraphs on the site, but it was really simple. Like it had nodes, it had users, it had paragraphs, it had paragraph library on the site, but okay, that's not too much. And the second one used OpenSocial, and OpenSocial does a lot of things on the background too. And it's a lot of work, and it made it we had less data to migrate on the second project. And the migration time from the first time you launched your first migration to the last one, it was 14 hours. And the first application, it was 2 hours. Even if, okay, the second app was more complicated, but it had much less data to migrate than the first one. We spend a lot more time developing, implementing it, and running the commands than the first one. So I think it would depend on your application, how much time. I don't know if it answers your question, but I saw differences between two applications just because it doesn't have the same, not the same modules in this case, but yes. I think it could affect the modules you use to what behavior you're gonna have your migration. Don't know if it answers your question. From a module.
Yeah, so you have used migrate tools module to run commands, or have you used migrate debug to find all this stuff? Migrate plus module that
migrate
creates...
plus migrate tools, migrate, but migrate translation, I think it was too. Just everything that could help us to migrate the best way. I'm sorry, didn't understand the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.